Hey everyone, welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. Got a really great guest on today. He's an editor and typographer living in Oakland. He's an associate curator at Letterform Archive and co-publishes Fonts in Use and Typographica. Please join me in welcoming Stefan Coles. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You ready for 20 questions?
Let's go.
Question one, tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
Well, I am primarily a writer and a curator and a publisher. And all of those things revolve around my interest in typography and lettering primarily, but also graphic design more generally. And my main role is as a curator and editorial director at Letterform Archive in San Francisco. And then I have these side projects that you mentioned, Fonts in Use and Typographica, which I try to maintain as resources for the graphic designers like I was when I was starting in the field.
Great. And just a quick note for the audience, if you're interested in the typography episodes, check out our episode with Eric Speakerman. It is our most popular episode. Question two, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
I'm glad you just mentioned Eric. I actually worked for him for about 7 years at his company Font Shop, and that's why I first moved to San Francisco.
Awesome.
So yeah, what makes me different? I think it's probably just, I mean, this is not different, but it's led to some skills that may be unusual, and that is obsession with type has led to an ability to identify typefaces, which in most instances is kind of a fun party trick and not necessarily that useful, but it has become useful when I was as a freelancer and helping out with different design firms and type foundries with font selection advice and helping them identify both the typefaces they were looking for, but also similar typefaces. And in one way that helped me get a job at Font Shop in that there's a big book that they published back in the early 2000s called Font Book. It was the largest compendium of digital fonts, and I helped to do cross-references. So when you were looking at one font that you really liked, but you wanted something a little bit different, you would see a list of see also. And so, if you're looking at Arial, you would see examples, in the list of Helvetica and Monotype Grotesque and FF Dogny. So it was a way of guiding people away from the usual choices. And I think that's one of the few things that I do that is maybe unique.
Great, I love it. So question three, why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
It's just basically in part of my my psyche, I guess. I've always been interested in classification of things. So when I was first really thinking about this kind of stuff as a little kid, it was more in the line of bird watching. I was a birder as a young boy, spent time with the Audubon Society in my local Salt Lake City, and I was all interested in how birds were classified. And that really extends in more ways than you might think to typography and the way that typefaces are classified. And so that kind of part of my brain has always been there, and I'm sure that's what kind of led me towards typography. Besides getting a Mac when I was fairly young, one of the early all-in-one Macs, and experimenting with the fonts that were available there, working at a newspaper in high school and college, all those things kind of led me to this interest in typography and typefaces.
Great, great. Four, some people struggle with, but the question is, what does your future look like?
I understand why people would struggle. Well, my future is, I guess it's a sign that I'm really happy with where I'm at and the kinds of things that I get to help contribute to. And that is, I hope to continue doing what I'm doing, which is, helping to make objects of graphic design and type history available to the public through Letterform Archive, and continuing to build resources on the web like fonts in use. My goal is to, not just have endless growth, both personally and professionally, and go on to the next thing, but actually continue to build things that are useful and inspiring to other people.
Great. Number 5 we say is unique to this show. The question is, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
That's a good question. So those two halves of what I do, one being Letterform Archive and the other being these online resources, are very location specific. So the online stuff I could do from anywhere. So place doesn't have much of any correlation or requirement. But Letterform Archive is definitely a physical space. We have a physical collection of graphic design objects and artifacts. We have a classroom and a reading room, and people come here from all around the world to see some of the things that we have in the collection. So the reason I'm still in San Francisco, even though I love it here, is because of this center for typography, and the amazing thing about being able to see things in person that are printed and tactile, and you get to feel the paper and get a sense of the scale of a book. Those are all really important to what we do, which is very separate from the kind of inspiration you might get on the internet, which doesn't give you those sensory material like inspiration points. So there are a lot of advantages to having the online resources, and then there are a lot of very specific advantages to having a physical archive of inspiration. And yeah, that is where place matters for me for the archive here.
Great. And just a quick note for the audience, if you like the Oakland aspect of this show, check out our episode with Jessica Hish. She's also based in Oakland, I believe. So question 6, if you had to start from the beginning, what advice would you give your former younger self?
I would say not to be, and this is probably very common, but not to be afraid to try new things. I did start a lot of, kind of, when I was a younger kid, when I was in elementary school, I would start clubs, and I even had like a little protest group in elementary school, Students on Strike, where I'd go out with a sign and say, we want more recess time and all this stuff. I would do little clubs about nature or about interests of mine, and not be afraid to like draw other people in and create a community around those interests. And then in high school and college, I got a little bit less less daring, I guess, and less outward facing, and just kind of went with the flow. And I think if I would have gone back, I would have tried to be more of an kind of a community organizer like I was when I was really young. But I kind of gotten back to that now since creating these web communities, and with working at the archive here. And so it's kind of losing my way a little bit, but coming back to it. But if I was going to give advice to anybody who is a young designer or anyone, it would be to take chances and not be afraid to fail. But I know that's not uncommon.
Great. And 7, what's a day in your life like?
So most days I'm coming into Letterform Archive here in San Francisco. A day here would consist of arriving, see what came in the mail during one of the days. Maybe I was away. I'm here about 3-4 days a week. And usually those things that arrive in the mail are exciting because they're new additions to our collection. So it may be a rare book, or a piece of original artwork from a sign painter, or an archive of a graphic designer who has donated their work to our collection. So I would be opening that up, kind of evaluating it, reporting it, sharing it with our team here at the archive. Then I probably have a bunch of meetings, and those can be meetings with people on our marketing team or our curatorial team, exhibitions, kind of all those cross-functional kinds of teams where we collaborate to do interesting things together here. And then I hopefully spend some time writing or doing research about the collection, preparing blog posts for our website, or helping our social media manager with what we might put on our Instagram and Mastodon accounts. And then hopefully, a lot of days I get to host visitors, like I will do after this call. I'll be going in to our reading room and hosting a visitor from India who's come all this way, probably for other things too, but also to make a visit to the archive to look at some of our rare calligraphy writing books from the 17th, 18th centuries. And she's a type designer and just looking for inspiration from these sources that aren't readily available in India. And I love to do those kinds of research visits or tours where I guide people through the collection that we have here. Those are usually kind of tabletop tours where we'll set a bunch of objects from throughout printing and design history on a table and give a little overview of this massive collection of 100,000 objects we have here so that they can get a sense of what we have and hopefully come back and dig a little deeper into whatever their specific interests are. And then I might go home at the end of the day and spend a little time working on fonts in use or the Typographica library online of digital type specimens, and do a bunch of reading. Usually I'm getting my news these days, at least from the design and tech world, from Mastodon. There's a very active type community there, and librarian community. And then I'll watch something with my wife and go to bed.
Great. And 8, lifelong learning is a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
Like I said, I think, a lot of us these days are learning or at least getting introduced to things through social media. And for me, the most useful network for that these days has been Mastodon. I found, I've been a little disillusioned with corporate social media and the algorithms and the, push towards exponential growth and, just everything that comes along with being corporate owned on these other platforms. And I've really found a great community on Mastodon to learn more from. And primarily for me, that's been recently understanding what it's like to be a curator and a librarian, because those are two things that I need to do in my professional position, but are not things that I was trained to do formally, or I didn't go to school for those roles. So I'm learning a lot from other people in the field. And then, of course, there's community of, as I said, other type designers and typographers there that I learn from. And then, of course, I learned from everybody here on the team at Letterform Archive. We have a amazing team of book publishers, editors, historians, people who do photography of rare books, people who are really great at doing programming of tours and salons and other events. And they all have different skills and teach me something new about the collection or about what we do or trying to do here as a nonprofit every day.
Great. 9 is around tools. Can you talk about your use of digital and analog tools?
Yeah, I have very few analog tools these days. And most of the work that we do at the archive that is about conservation or preservation is done by our collections team, and they do all that analog stuff. But digitally, I use a lot of Google Docs, kind of regrettably. I really enjoy using Notion on my own kind of work. But as a team here at the archive, like many organizations and companies, we rely on Google to do all our kind of collaborative sheets and docs. We're also really avid users these days of Airtable. That's a big part of our kind of databases of collections here at the archive, and it helps us with cataloging and with organizing how we do tours and learn about our collection. And then I also just love the most simple, basic default apps that come with your Mac, which Preview does so many things that many people overlook. Like I never open Acrobat. I always do everything PDF wise or almost everything image wise with Preview. Love text edit. Love all those basic apps to get basic things done if they're well designed.
Great. Halfway number 10. Can you talk about work life or life work balance?
Yes, I don't have such a thing, or I would say that the balance is probably much more askew than most people aim for, but it's just my life. I'm fortunate enough to have a life or a work that is very tied to my personal interests. So I really see very little boundary between my life and work. My wife, she might say we should spend some more personal time together, and she's right. But she's also a lettering artist and illustrator, and so she's part of this world too. She volunteers at the archive. So our family life is also intertwined with our work life. So yeah, don't have probably what most people consider a healthy balance, but on the other hand, I'm lucky to be doing what I love, and that's where I want to spend my time anyway. On those rare occasions I'm not doing something with design or typography, it's just being out of doors. We try to take a lot of hikes and be in nature. So that would be the the main separation from the work.
Great. And 11. If you weren't doing what you do now, what might you be doing?
That's a great question. I don't really know. I think when I was taking one of those aptitude tests as a high school freshman, I think that the recommended job was clerk, kind of a generic position, but probably would work well for me because I am, detail oriented, enjoy writing, keeping records, keeping things organized. So maybe it's something along those lines, and not necessarily in a leadership role, but just doing something deep in in collections or databases, or gathering information for other people to use. I mean, I think no matter what I'm into, I really want to make something that's useful and inspiring to other people.
And what would you not like to do with your career?
Well, I've been fortunate to be either freelance before my job here, or working with a nonprofit, which is Letterform Archive, and I'd like to stay in that world. I'm not built for the corporate world. I'm not built for large companies with a very hierarchical system with hundreds or thousands of employees. So I really like working with a small team, and I like working for a mission rather than for profit.
Great. And do you have a favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Hmm. A favorite word, quote, or sentence? I would say, it's not a full sentence, but I just kind of am always driven by the idea of optimism, of looking at the positive side of things. I guess there's a quote around, if it's something that you can't control, you can control how you respond to it, how you react to it. So there's so much in life that we can't control, that I feel like I'm a much better person and I'm more effective if I'm reacting to things positively and trying to spin them in a way that will bring joy or resolution or, a new way of doing things.
Great. And how about a least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Well, I guess my least favorite word is apathy.
Great. And 15, if you had to pick one word to describe yourself, what word would you choose?
I guess maybe the opposite of apathy, which would be curious.
What keeps you up at night?
Often it's about just wanting to do the right thing with the archive. We're a fairly young institution, and so we have a lot of different directions we could go, which is a great thing because that means we have a lot of flexibility. We're not like an older library or museum that has a lot of baggage and has very strict ways of doing things, but it also means we have to make a lot of decisions. And I'm always, thinking about whether what I did that day or what we're working on now is the right thing to do for the org and for our community.
Great. And final stretch here. What's a dream you're chasing?
Currently I'm just chasing the dream of hiring some people so that I can get out of the more marketing side of things here at the archive and back into more curatorial and editorial things. So I'm chasing the dream of finding good people who really love marketing.
What inspires you?
Well, I'm surrounded by this collection of, hundreds of years of design that's constantly inspiring me. But then, like I said before, the people who interact with it and often the people who come to visit the archive are inspiring. The way they respond to what they see or the new information that they bring to what we share. It's something that most people don't realize is that an archive or a museum curator or a docent never knows everything about the object that they're sharing. And then we often learn as much from our guests as we know. So those kind of interchanges with people who come to visit, those are always inspiring.
Great. And last couple here, number 19, any advice you'd like to share?
Well, specifically in terms of graphic design or typography, my advice is to get off the internet and get into a library, a special collections library. But particularly, there are often these collections in your city or near you that you may not realize exist and are accessible. Often university libraries are a little bit more difficult to get access to if you're not already at the school, but you'll be surprised what your local library or what your university library has to offer in terms of design, history, and inspiration. If you just go visit their rare book room and tell them what you're interested in. Librarians love nothing more than just being given a general, area of interest, or tell them a designer you're interested in or an artist you're interested in, and they love to introduce you to what they have in the collection. And seeing these things in person can do a lot that seeing them online can't do. Like I said before, having an object in front of you and seeing the scale of it, getting a sense of the materiality of it, and interacting with it. Even if you're not a print designer, it can teach you a lot about interacting with visual media, and it'll give you new ideas that you wouldn't have anticipated. So yeah, there's so much out there that isn't on the internet, isn't on social media. Get off Instagram and get into the rest of the internet and digital collections from libraries on the web, but also get into a physical collection if you can and look at it in person.
Great. And finally, number 20, how can our listeners keep tabs on you, and what's our call to action?
Well, I would say the best way to keep tabs on me is to follow me on Mastodon. You can go to typo.social /@Typographica, and that is my typography kind of social media account. But you can also follow Letterform Archive, our blog, and our newsletter. Those are places where you'll see a lot of my writing and get to learn about what I'm learning about at the archive. So go to letterformarchive.org and go to the news section and sign up for the newsletter.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining today. You know, when I was a design student 20 years ago, you were definitely on the radar of a person to watch. So it's super cool to have you here today. Thanks so much for joining.
Oh, it's an honor to be invited. Thanks for having me on the show.